I'll give everyone a moment to unmute if you have any questions for Carl about the Rotary Foundation or himself, or about himself and his career.
Hi, Carl. This is Diana Phillips in Hillsborough. Great presentation. Thanks very much. I wanted to ask about the disbursement of funds from the endowment. Is there a requirement that a certain amount be dispersed, like 5%?
That's a great question. And the answer to that is every year the trustees meet and they decide what the spending rate will be for that year based on market performance. So in years of good market performance, spending rate will be higher. In years of poor market performance, spending rate will be less. And so each year that gets evaluated based on market performance. And it gets a little more complicated than that because that's a general spending rate. Then each named fund that I mentioned, that the endowment fund is comprised of many named funds, each one of those funds is also individually evaluated. And it's given a rating of 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on its performance based over its original gift value. So a fund that is above water by more than 10%, we'll spend at the full rate. So whatever the trustees have said that spending rate is, it will spend at. Funds that are above water but by under 10% will spend, but they'll spend at a reduced rate so that they can continue to grow. Funds that are below water but under 10% below water will spend but minimally because they really want to recoup the value of that fund. And funds that are below water by more than 10% will not spend because they really just want to focus on those individual funds being brought up. And so all of that math gets done to determine how much is going to be spent on any given year from our earnings. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it's quite complicated, but thank you.
It is. And the document, if you want to study on that a little more, the Endowment Fund Financial Report, it's available on the Rotary webpage. Or if you wanted the hard copy, let me know, I'll mail you one. But that's the document that kind of describes that, and every year it comes out with that year's numbers and goes through all of those things in great detail.
Thanks very much.
I think I have a question regarding the foundation support for local responsibilities. How is that handled again? I think you called that with the annual fund. Sure.
So every district handles this in its own way. So we are in District 7710. Right. And District 7710 has a certain amount of money available every year through what's called district designated funds. District designated funds come to the district from a couple of ways. One is it's half of what the annual fund giving was 3 years ago. Because with our annual fund, the gift is made, it's invested for 3 years, and then after that time, it's shared 50% to district designated funds. In addition to that, endowment fund earnings that have been set up by the donor to support district designated funds for District 7710 would be added to the annual fund giving. So those two kind of streams of income come in to make up district designated funds. Now districts then can have discretion as to how or how not to spend that money within certain guidelines. So of that district designated funds, half of it, if the district, first of all, the district does not have to spend it. There's no rule that says the district has to spend their district designated funds. So it's up to a district to decide, first of all, do we want to spend our money this year or not? I believe 7710 pretty much usually does. Not every district does. Half of that money, up to half of that, can be spent for what's called district grants. District grants are up to the district to decide what they want to do with that program. Some districts put very stringent requirements on what that can be, set value amounts. Other districts don't. And our district Rotary Foundation coordinator is past District Governor Barry Phillips. And he would be the one to really answer your questions in more detail about this particular district's policy on district grants. But that's up to each individual district to decide what works best for them in their area. And that's really because Rotary International up in Evanston says the people who live in the Triangle know best how to meet the needs of the Triangle. The people who live in the Eastern Shore know how best. People live in the, really local people should decide what's best. So the local district gets to decide that. In addition to that, any amount of DDF can be spent on Rotary's global projects. The thinking is those are already vetted. Those are our international priorities. That includes the eradication of polio. That includes our Peace Centers program, and that includes approved global grants. So most districts want to do a lot in terms of district grants. And so most districts say, well, half of our DDF can be spent on district grants, so we're just going to max that out. They don't have to spend it on district grants, but most do. So most districts will say 50% of our district designated funds are going to district grants. The other 50% is going to be divided between polio eradication, Rotary Peace Centers, and global grants. And that really is up to each district to decide. Now, our district here is home to our only Rotary Peace Center in North America. And that makes sense that this district, therefore, has a very high dedication to our Peace Centers program and always gives, I believe it's $25,000 of district designated funds to support our Peace Center program. That's a district choice. And we kind of get a twofer there because it's considered a global program, but it is, in Durham and Chapel Hill. So we do get, you could consider that being local, even though it is a global program. And we also are asked to give 20% of our district designated funds to the eradication of polio until such time as polio is eradicated. That's not a binding request. This district usually does not give that much, but that is the official request, and it is a request that's made of any district to do.
Okay, I was thinking, and thank you for that question. It does get very complicated, but if let's say I wanted to provide something specifically for Durham Public Schools as a scholarship, for instance, on a more ongoing, semi-permanent basis, would it be better to do it toward like an annual fund or directly to the foundation for something else that I haven't heard of?
Right. So the level of specificity that a donor can have with the Rotary Foundation, as far as how local it can get, does not be more local than the district.
Okay.
So a donor can set up things to be done by his or her district, but not more specific than that. So as far as endowing specific work for a community within a district such as Durham, we don't really allow that level of specificity.
Gotcha.
It can be expressed as a non-binding desire, but it's not binding upon the district to do that.
Okay.
So
it could be district wide.
Correct. Yes,
okay.
We allow the level of specificity to get down to a district, but not beyond, not lower than that. And that's a logistical issue of trying to manage these funds. When we work with a donor, we have to honor the donor's intent. And so if we aren't positive that in the future we will be able to honor that intent, we don't accept the gift.
Gotcha.
And the example I give is, with the death of Fidel Castro, it kind of points that out. But if in 1950 someone had wanted to endow a grant for Rotary to do work in Cuba, golly, we'd have had a lot of time sitting there with that money not being able to spend it on anything else. So we like to leave enough broadness in any gift we receive so that reasonably we anticipate we would be able to spend the money for philanthropic impact and not have it so specific that we really couldn't do anything with it. And you know, we work one-on-one with donors, but we really do try to be true to that value that we won't accept a gift we can't actually administer.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's a good answer.
Well, great question, Jean. So Carl, this is Jeanne. I have a question. For the most part, are all the people who you're interacting with, are they Rotarians who are donating, or are they non-Rotarians?
The vast majority of the people I work with are all Rotarians, and that makes sense because we are a member-based organization and it is our foundation. Now that said, anyone can give to the Rotary Foundation regardless of their membership status. So there's no reason that a non-Rotarian could not give to us. And of course, you know, Bill Gates, our #1 donor, is not himself an actual active Rotarian. He's an honorary Rotarian. His father's an active member, but he himself is not, and he's our #1 donor. So certainly non-Rotarians see the efficiency and efficacy of the Rotary Foundation. And I tell people, don't take my word for it. Charity Navigator, independent watchdog, just rated us with a 100% rating. We're one of a handful of charities that get that rating from them. So if you're really just looking for a good, efficient charity, regardless of your membership, certainly we are very, very good steward of our donors' resources. But that said, the vast majority of the people I work with are Rotarians. Sometimes I'll work with people who want to make a gift in honor of their parent who's a Rotarian. I work with a lot of donors who are setting up funds in the name of their children, and their children are not Rotarians, but they are. But they want to put the fund in their kid's name or something of that nature as a family thing. One of the most touching gifts I ever worked on was with a donor up in Williamsburg, Virginia. She set up a named fund to honor her dad, who's a Rotarian up in New England, as a Father's Day present. And that was what she wanted to give him for Father's Day as a lifelong Rotarian. She lives in Virginia, so she worked with me, but he lives up in New England. And that was really a neat thing to be part of.
That's awesome. Can you talked about, sorry, if someone has another question, I'll give you another second. You talked about Charity Navigator. Can you tell us, I guess, where we are or how we rank and why that is?
Sure. So we have a score of 100 from Charity Navigator. We have their 4-star rating, which is their highest rating we've held for a long time. And frankly, the reason we're able to have such a high rating is because Rotary is a nonprofit that has been created by business and professional leaders, and we have 100 years of good leadership, the foundation of being led well for over 100 years now. I take some examples of that. I told you how we invest our annual fund, so that our investment earnings are what's paying for our operating costs by and large. I don't know of any other nonprofit that's doing it. You read my bio. I've been doing this as a profession since 1999. I've worked for a lot of different nonprofits. I still do a little consulting. I've written a book, and I don't know of any other. There might be some, but I've never run across any other nonprofit that's able to do that. Most nonprofits need to take their annual fund and they need to use it to pay their bills, to keep their lights on, to keep doing their good work. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we have the luxury of, because we were set up right to begin with so long ago, that we can take money and invest it for 3 years before we need to access it. That gives us the power of the markets. And now, of course, who would have thought of that as the business and professional leaders who started the Rotary Foundation? Another example I give of good stewardship and just good business sense in the leading of the foundation. If you go up to Evanston, and I'd encourage anybody who finds himself up in Evanston near Chicago, I have to go up there next week, which I'm not looking forward to the cold weather. I say go in summer if you can. Last year's summer fell on a Thursday in Chicago, so I recommend not going in December. But if you ever do get up there, you'll know that the Rotary Foundation is in a 20-story building. It only uses the top 10 floors. The bottom 10 floors are rented out. And the rent from those bottom 10 floors pays for the cost of owning that 20-story building. So it's another example of a good business decision being made by the nonprofit, which allows us to have better philanthropic impact. And many nonprofits do not have the benefit of good business leadership. And certainly very few nonprofits have over 100 years of good business leadership that's created a very solid place for us today like we have. And we're very fortunate in that regard. And that's why we're able to rank so highly. If you want to think about our board and trustees, look up who they are and look up their professions, look up and imagine how much money they earn, how much it would cost any nonprofit to buy that level of leadership, and nobody could afford it. Think about the value, every club president, every club foundation chair in communities all over the world. Imagine if a nonprofit had to pay for that level of expertise. Nobody could afford it. And yet Rotary has that level of expertise being given to us for free from our own members. And it's that volunteer leadership that allows us to be so incredibly effective. And really, again, 100 years of that adds up to big impact. When I was in England one time, I was walking around Cambridge University, and the grass was just beautifully green in the squares. And I said to the person who was giving me the tour, I said, how do you get that grass so green? He said, oh, you Americans always ask that question. He said, it's very simple. You simply water it and cut it, water it and cut it, water it and cut it. You do that for 600 years and it'll look that green. And it's similar with Rotary. You spend 100 years of running the foundation well, and you end up with the foundation we have today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl. Does anyone else have any other questions? Or if you want to, you can also put it in the chat and I'll read it for you. Okay, well, people are thinking of other questions. I know that, some Rotary clubs have their own foundations. How does that conflict or work in tandem with the Rotary Foundation?
Oh, that's a great question. There's no conflict. I tell people, if you were to go in my backyard right now and go in my tool shed, you'd see a whole lot of tools. And every time that Harbor Freight catalog comes, it seems like another tool gets added to the tool shed. But each one of those is for a different purpose. I have a hammer for driving nails. I have screwdrivers for screws. I have a drill motor for drilling holes. I have a rake for raking the yard. Every one of those tools is important because it serves a unique purpose. And the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International serves a very different purpose than the local club's foundation might serve. And they're both tools for the donor. And the wise donor will have to determine what philanthropic impact she or he wants to have, and then figure out which of the many tools available to him or her is the best one to use for that specific goal. And so if a donor really cared about doing something very local, I think Jean mentioned doing something in Durham. If the donor's main goal really was to just do something in Durham, why then a local foundation to Durham might be a more appropriate tool for that purpose than an international foundation that takes a very broad global view. But if the donor wants to ensure that his legacy lives on in 200 years from now, well, then you might want to pick the biggest, most established, well-run nonprofit that's most likely to still be around and be well-run in 200 years. Or if, like General Blasey out in Asheville I told you about, he wanted kids from all over the world to be taught how to read and write, because that's what his wife did, is they traveled all over the world in his various postings. So he wanted a very international impact. So the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International made sense for that. So it really is a depending question of what impact is it that you want to have. And most of us give to multiple charities because we have different impacts. My club has its own foundation. We support a dental clinic here in Raleigh. And that Rotary Foundation of Rotary International isn't the right tool for that. So we have our own foundation for that goal. But our work that's international and broad is going to be best accomplished through our giving through our Rotary International Foundation. The only thing I will say on that is the Rotary Foundation, as a service to our individual members and clubs, offers donor-advised funds. And many clubs will find that instead of creating their own foundation, it's less expensive and more efficient for them instead to create a donor-advised fund within the Rotary Foundation so that they can still have that control over the gift. The donors can still get the tax deduction for making the gift. They can still spend it locally in their own community on the projects about which they care in their own backyard, but they don't have the legal liabilities of owning their own foundation, and they don't have the administrative burden and the tax burden and all of that of keeping their own foundation. So many clubs, instead of their own foundation, will set up a donor-advised fund with the Rotary Foundation instead. But really, that's just another tool in the toolbox.
So may I ask a question about this donor-advised fund? You need to put in a certain amount of money to start it, don't you?
Yes, $10,000.
And can the amount, do you need to keep it at that level, or can the amount go below that level?
No, the amount can go to zero. You can close out the donor-advised fund. And in fact, very few donor-advised funds are designed to last forever. Most donor-advised funds are designed to be a tool for timing. And so most individuals, a club might start a donor-advised fund with the intention of it going on forever. A group of people might. That's called a group donor-advised fund. But most donor-advised funds are actually owned by individuals. They're the individual account holder. Own is not the correct term, the individual account holder. And so in that case, it's a matter of timing. A donor would want to be able to give the philanthropic gift in a particular tax year, get the tax receipt, and then have the charity receive the gift in a different tax year. So there needs to be a holding place for that gift in the meantime. The donor-advised fund is the best tool for that goal. But donors can open up a donor-advised fund and then immediately make grants out of it. In fact, I'm working with a donor in, where's he at? Oh, I don't remember where he's in one of the Carolinas, but I can't remember where at right now, who is going to make a gift, a Procter & Gamble stock, about $17,000 worth, to open up a donor-advised fund. Immediately out of that is going to come about $12,000 to our annual fund. The remaining value of that donor-advised fund is going to be given to his church over time, and he's going to add to that, and the value of that fund will fluctuate up and down as he gives out of it and gives into it. The reason the DAF made sense for him is he wanted to only mess with transferring stock one time, and now was the time he wanted to liquidate that Procter & Gamble stock. But now is not the time he wanted his church to get it. They're doing a campaign later on. So he's going to make one transaction of stock to the donor-advised fund and then give directly from there right away to the annual fund so that he will become a level 2 major donor. And then the remainder of that will sit in that donor-advised fund as long as he wants it to until his church is ready for their campaign and he wires it off to his church or he gives more into it. And that's completely up to him as to what he wants to do with that.
May I ask just one more question? Could Gene do something like that and give the money to a scholarship, or would it have to go to a 501c3 organization?
That's a great question, and that's the biggest kind of weakness of donor-advised funds. They're very limited in how they can support scholarships. A little history on donor-advised funds. We now almost 30, I guess we've probably more than 30 years with them, but they've only really been popular last 20 years or so. And when they were first set up, there weren't a lot of controls on them, and there were some abuses of them by individuals. Suppose Gene and I both had kids go to college. Well, we'd set up a donor-advised fund, and out of my donor-advised fund, I'd pay for Gene's son to go to school, and out of Gene's donor-advised fund, he'd pay for my daughter to go to school, and we both our kids got to go to school, and we got tax deductions. And so there was some people not really doing what was intended with those donor-advised funds in the early years of DAFs, and so restrictions were put on them as to what they can do for scholarships as a response to that. So today, donor-advised funds can only make grants to approved U.S. charities. They don't have to be a 501c3. The IRS defines approved charity fairly broadly, but it does have to be to an approved charity. Now most schools are, so depending on what kind of scholarship program any particular school might have, you could fund a scholarship program you could give to, UNC or Duke or, NC State or whoever. And it would be up to that institution as to their gift receipt policy as to how they allowed you to designate funding from there into their scholarship programs, because obviously each school defines those things for themselves. But the gift could not be made, to the student. And a lot of Rotary clubs, I know mine back in Indiana, we used to give $500 to the valedictorian and $250 to the salutatorian of our local high school. That could not be done through a donor-advised fund. That sort of giving is what you would have to have your own foundation to accomplish. Additionally, DAFs can only give to U.S. charities. So if your club was giving a lot of money to an orphanage in, Nicaragua, while you could not give to a Nicaraguan charity from your donor-advised fund. It would have to go to a U.S. charity because you received the U.S. tax deduction when the gift was made into the DAF.
Thanks very much.
Awesome questions. Thank you very much, Diana. I was almost going to ask the same thing. So I have on the page right now, if you have a monitor, the NPolio.org website where you can donate and learn more about NPolio now. Our district governor, Racine, has challenged each of us as Rotarians in our district to donate at least $30 to Polio Plus. So definitely take a moment to donate, do it before the end of the year, I guess. It's a good tax option. Or you could also, there's also different options. You could do, I think, monthly or regular payments. So definitely take a look at the website. Everything is really on Rotary.org, so check it out. And again, I'd like to thank Carl for being here this evening. And thank you. And in honor of being here tonight and sharing with us so much information about the Rotary Foundation, here's a certificate of appreciation. And
thank you so much.
And you're always welcome to join us if you're traveling and can't join your Rotary Club meeting. You're always welcome to join us.
Thank you. I will probably do that. Now that I know how easy it is and I don't need any special apps or software or anything, I probably will come in and join you from time to time. And if anyone has any questions that they didn't ask tonight or they think of later, please feel free to email me at any time. I'd be happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. And tonight I've asked Christopher to lead us in the four-way test. So, Chris?
Sure. Four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Well, awesome. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for being here tonight, Carl, and thank you, Judy, for being here as well, and all our members. Have a safe and wonderful evening, and that's Rotary for tonight.
Good night.